just getting into my system. If you're there, I'm just getting into my system. Just give me a moment. I figure if I'm going to break community standards, why not do it with some cool music, right? Just give me a moment. Let's see. All right, so we're in. So good evening, everyone. Today is May 11th, year of our Lord 2025. I want to thank everyone for joining. Tonight, we'll go over the markets. Then we're going to go over the trade deal with the UK. After that, we're going to go over Howard Lutnik just fawning over Trump. I mean, it was really something to witness.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act.
Yeah, so you know, fawning over Trump at the press conference the other day. So we'll go over that. Really hard to watch. Then Powell admits that the Fed, that their policies have them boxed in a corner. Then Treasury Secretary Scott Besset makes a complete fool of himself live on TV in front of Congress. So obviously we're going to have some tariff talking coming. What else do we have? Also, a Democrat Georgia politician was arrested for human trafficking. Okay, that's a story that's one of my friends have sent to me. And so it made it in there, and I think it's important. And finally, we have a new Pope, Pope Leo. And we're going to go over that whole debacle. Well, it's not a debacle for me. It seems to be for everyone else. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/@brewmedia. Please like, share, and comment. I appreciate everyone. And, you know, so let's get into this. Also, breaking just moments earlier, like a few hours earlier, Scott Besset and Jamison Greer said that there's some deal that they cut with China, and the U.S. trade deficit has been struck. Actual details of the deal will supposedly be released tomorrow. You know, I've seen this play out before dozens of times. You know, the last China deal was the greatest deal known to mankind. The UK trade deal was supposed to be the greatest deal of all mankind. And all of those turned out to be flops so far. And so far, the markets are biting, taking the bait again. But we'll see. The devil's in the details. And if it's a BS deal, then the markets will reverse the futures that we see. So I want to start off by going over the markets first. Hi, everybody, and thank you and welcome. First, we had another wild ride in the markets this week. First down, then way up, then another pullback. The Dow settled at 41,249. It started out in the week at 41,173. But at one point, the Dow was up 800 points from the big news on the tariffs with UK. And what happened was the Dow every day was getting clobbered, along with the dollar and everything else. And so then they came out, they rushed out and said, hey, you know, we have a deal on Wednesday night. Thursday morning, they come out with the deal. The stock market did rise. It rose to 41,761. But then, after the deal was uncovered, the Dow gave up most of its gains on Friday, falling more than 500 points. The Dow, by the end of the week, all the ups and downs, settled at 0.18%. So basically, the Dow was completely flat last week. And that was because when it was all said and done, you know, we still have to pay the 10% tax on imports coming in from the UK. Also, the deal regarding Boeing, that deal has been going on for 4 years. And, so that was nothing new. That's just for Boeing. That's not going to help the average American. So when that happened, the Dow pulled back. So now the S&P was also swinging all over the place. It started out at 5,665 points. But then it had a big pop like the Dow did on Thursday from all the hype about the tariff news. It rose more than 100 points to 5,718. But then after the news came out about the trade deal, the S&P and the Dow returned most of their gains, falling back to 5,659. So pulling back roughly 60% of its gains on the week, which landed at a 0.08 gain for the week. That was it. I mean, not even a tenth of 1 full percent. So you really made nothing as well in the S&P. Because again, once traders seen the deal, they pulled their chips back off the table. And look, I hope the China deal's a great deal. This is the big one. This is the one that matters the most. But if this deal is anything like the UK deal, I mean, I think it's going to be Armageddon, possibly in the dollar, in the bonds, and in the stock market. Let's look at the Russell 2000. Now, the Russell held up much better on the week. It started out the week at 2,003 points. And also, again, same thing. It had a big pop on Thursday, going to 2,040 points. And then pulled back some. And ended up the week at 2,023 points. So, the Russell did a little bit better. They had a 0.95 gain, so almost a full percent up in the Russell 2000. And so let's look at the gold market. How did the gold market hold up? Well, gold outshined all the other markets again because it was up over 2% on the week. Gold started out at $32.62 per ounce, and then it popped up to over $3,446 per ounce on Wednesday. So a major pop-up flirting to old new highs. Then Trump made his trade deal announcement and gold pulled back. Gold pulling back, and some thinking that the trade deal would be great, which lowered prices. Well, gold gave back $110, but then once the market shook out all the weak hands and realized that the deal was a sour lemon for the country, gold then rallied again, back up $50 an ounce, landing at $33.29 per ounce, up over 2% on the week. So let's take a peek at the gold mining stocks, which crushed it this week. Gold mining stocks, the GDXJ was up 5.27% on the week. These are huge moves for this sector. This sector never moves like this. And it landed at $64.33 per share. So you could get into the GDXJ and own the gold that's in the ground, right, and their company for $64.33. What a bargain when gold is flirting with almost $3,400. The GDX also had a nice week and moved up 3% on the week, landing at $50.37 per share. Newmont Mining Corp was also up 2.35% on the week and landed at $53.98 per share. Now, the dollar caught a bid on the pre-tariff news, catching almost a full percentage up, but then sold off after the deal was put out. 50% of what it gained, it gave back. And the pre-market dollar is selling off more. So while the dollar ended slightly higher on the week, it has the same trajectory lower. Now, I checked the dollar before I went on. the dollar futures are looking up again because, again, you know, Trump had put out this China deal, and so they're very bullish on it. But again, the devil's in the details. Right now, the average investor is still toying with the markets and gambling on the Mag 7 and the Dow. But once the market realizes that the Fed has lost control of the dollar and we are headed for stagflation, which Jerome Powell actually described our economy is heading towards the other day, which I'm going to get into later. I believe that we could see gains of 10x and 20x, maybe 50x in the gold and in the mining stocks, depending on how badly the Fed reacts. So I wanted to go over the markets. So the next story I want to go over is the trade deal was made with the UK, and first, the Trump and his team came out and they were congratulating each other. And if you remember, Trump came out with the truth post the night before the markets closed, and that got the markets all juiced up on the news. The Dow rose 800 points, which was why the president put out the truth before the markets closed on Wednesday, trying to, build up the markets. He wanted as much uplift to the markets as he could get. And to be honest, hi everybody. I really despise the markets being, used like this. There's so much insider trading going on right now, so much ridiculousness. But not long after the deal was unveiled on Thursday, the markets reversed and pulled back, most of their gains falling the 500 points down to 41,240. But here's something that really was tough to watch. During the press conference, and it was a good press conference that Trump had gave. It was a great press conference. Up until Howard Lutnik completely deep-throated the president live on TV. I mean, it was pathetic to watch. And even Trump, as a business owner myself, and I have lots of employees who work for me, the last thing we want is a fucking total ass kisser. And this Howard Lutnik really made himself look so cheap and dirty. So I want to play a little bit of it. And you can see Trump has no respect for this guy. Trump doesn't like that stuff. Trump doesn't want you to just sit there and kiss his ass. Trump wants results, right? And Trump wants true mutual respect, right? And if you don't respect him, hey, he's going to come after you, But just to see this groveling, I mean, this was tough. It was really tough to watch. And I caught it. And I want to play a little clip of it right now. So check out Howard Lutnik, literally, just kissing Trump's tuchus.
President, and by the way, I want to make this clear. While Jameson and I worked hard, this was the president's deal. And people think, oh, that's not the way it works. If you get to sit next to him, I have the best deal maker to my left. And if you don't think that we take advantage of him calling the prime minister and getting that deal done, you don't understand who's the president of the United States. So he's the closer. He gets deals done that we could never get done because he understands business. He understands business. And that's why we're here today. So he agreed.
And Trump is looking like
100,000 cars into a...
my first thought was, well, if Trump basically closed the deal, what the hell do we need this guy for? I've been saying since day one, Trump needs to get rid of these lackeys. Trump doesn't even need J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is a complete wet noodle, too. I mean, Trump could literally run the entire, all of this all by himself. And Lutnik kind of let the cat out of the bag that he doesn't know what he's doing, and Trump basically did the whole thing. But Trump's face, it's priceless. I mean, if you ever go back, go Google it, go YouTube it. It's pretty funny. It has a little bit more of him, basically prostrating himself on in front of.
only pay a 10% tariff. And that protects their car industry. And remember, we do 16 million cars a year. So this is only like 0.6%. But for the UK auto people, this is tens of thousands of jobs that the president agreed that he would protect for them. So he made that deal, right?
See, he made that deal. Trump made it. And so, that's kind of hard to watch, somebody sitting there fawning. And Trump looked really uncomfortable. I could read Trump's eyes saying, shut up, shut up. You sound like a total, buffoon. Why do we need this guy? Trump did the whole thing. Where the hell did I go? So I was, thinking throughout my life and my career, I've had people like that who would just snivel up to me. And honestly, once you lose respect for somebody like that, you really, it's hard to really come back from that. I don't want somebody thinking that if they kiss my tuchus, that, they're going to get somewhere with me, because that just doesn't work for me. I'm one of those people, I taught my son when I was raising him, put up or shut up. Don't tell me, show me, right? That was a big one for me. Saying you're sorry is great, but what are you going to do now to fix it? Because that's, you screw up, right? I'm about results. And I know that's kind of where Trump comes from. Trump is a result guy. He wants to put wins up on the board. But he doesn't want, it just seemed, for me, it was hard to watch. So I don't know if anybody caught that. But anyway, if the goal was to reindustrialize the U.S., the deal with the UK completely fell flat. And let's be clear that the UK was not one of the countries faced with that broad reciprocal tariff that Trump was holding up that day on Liberation Day. However, it was always subject to the 10% tariff that applies to all countries. So, what did we get? What did the UK get? Well, it eliminates the 25% on UK steel and aluminum, reduces tariffs on British cars from 25% to 10%, only on the first $100,000. What do we get? We get fast tracks, U.S. goods through customs, okay. UK buying $10 billion in Boeing jets. Why is Boeing always in there somewhere? It's always with Boeing. But again, this Boeing deal has been going on for almost 4 years. And okay, good. Trump got that one across the line. But again, does that help the average American? No, it doesn't. UK pulls non-tariff barriers to U.S. goods. Okay, that's great. That could open up some beef and some other agricultural stuff. So this creates a $5 billion opportunity for new exports for U.S. farmers, producers, including more than $700 million in ethanol exports, and $250 million in American beef and other agricultural products. Now, here's the problem with the agricultural side of this. We tried this with Canada. We tried this with Mexico. Trump tried this with China. And the problem is these countries make their own beef, right? They have their own farms, right? And so in order for us to be able to sell into their markets, it doesn't matter where the tariffs are. If we are not producing that stuff at a cost that is effective for their consumers to consume it at a cheaper price than their own, then our beef is never going there, right? Look, there's a reason why we import a lot of fish into our country. Upwards of 60-65% of all seafood in America now comes from overseas. Why is that? Because we have so much taxation, regulation, employment regulation, so much that we put on our fisheries, the fishermen cannot compete with Japan, China, Korea, right? We just can't, right? So it actually makes we are prohibitive to ourselves. So unless Trump does something to alleviate the cost to our manufacturers, our farmers, our beef producers, right? This is not going to change, right? This tariff stuff, this is just, it's like having cancer and you're putting the Band-Aid over skin cancer. It's like, oh, look, I'm treating the symptom, but you're not treating the disease, I guess is my point, right? I could put a Band-Aid over my skin cancer. It doesn't actually fix the problem. And that's the problem with these trade deals. So I want to... Okay, so again, if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/@brewmedia. So I want to get into the next story, and I hope everybody's doing good for Mother's Day and all that. I got to talk to my mother and my aunt and my son and everybody, so I'm really happy about that. And everybody's doing good, and I hope everybody in your family's doing good. So the next story, watching Lutnik, though, that one was tough. And I've seen other clips of, like, other people fawning over Trump, and I don't know. I mean, I couldn't do it. Maybe I'm looking at it from my perspective. I'm just saying, from my perspective, I don't want that for me. I don't want people just sucking up to me just because they think that they could get something out of me. So maybe I read that wrong, But I know I did not read wrong. Lutnik literally, like, kissing Trump's tuchus all over the place, all over the White House. I mean, he's got brown all over his lips. It was tough, man. It was tough to watch. So the next story is about the Fed and Jerome Powell basically admitting that the Fed boxed itself in and that stagflation is now rearing its ugly head and that the Fed has no tools to fix it. So in his prepared remarks, Powell was saying that inflation expectations remained well anchored and that the Fed's job is to make sure that they remain that way. I'm not sure what Powell was actually looking at because the data shows something completely different, because inflation expectations are way higher than 2%. Even MAGA, hardcore, Alex Jones, tin hat wearing people believe prices are going up. You have to be completely fucking clueless to think prices are going down. Powell hasn't, and let me tell you, Powell hasn't been paying attention to any of the Michigan numbers that have been coming out on inflation expectations, which, with expectations showing a 6 handle over the next year. And over 5 years, they have a 5 handle. So we are nowhere near 2% expectations. So for the Fed to claim that they've kept a lid on inflation expectations anchored at 2%, he is flat out lying. This guy, from calling inflation transitory to all of this bundled nonsense that he's been doing, over the past 6 years. This guy's really screwed stuff up because, gold is a barometer. So, gold, being at 33, 40 something, that is flashing bright red. We are way too loose with monetary policy. And now Trump wants to throw more gasoline on the fire with more tax cuts, which is only going to rev money circulation up, which is going to raise prices. That's what that's going to do. Tax breaks are going to raise prices. Because let's say you're a waitress or my mother and aunt, right? If you say, hey, we're not going to tax your Social Security no more, or you're a waitress and we're not going to tax your tips anymore, right? They're not going to start a business with that money. They're going to go out. They're going to go shopping at Walmart. They're going to go buy more food, right? They're going to bid up prices. That's what's going to happen with the tax breaks that he's putting out. Now, one of the interesting things that did happen is that in their official memo, so you had to go down and actually read the memo, the Fed wrote that they expect unemployment to rise along with inflation. Funny because, Powell just completely sidestepped. So it's not either or, it's both. So they're saying the Federal Reserve, unemployment to rise along with inflation. So, wait, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. So the Fed is correct for the first time in years diagnosing what is about to happen. They are finally, to my side of the table, what I've been saying, predicting stagflation. I've been protecting myself the entire time. So I was early to the party, but at least I was able to sort of protect myself for when stagflation does happen. And so with all the damage that we've had, we are not even close to the ultimate damage that I believe that is coming. And that's the thing. A lot of people, they think, Biden's in the past, nothing bad can happen. We're just going to have a rosy, this is going to be the golden age of whatever. If that's the way that you're gambling or you're living your life, you are going to have a rude awakening for what is absolutely coming down the pike. Because this is all unraveling. And as these trade deals come out and they turn out to be non-deals, and I hope we get look, as an American, you want a good trade deal with China. You want good trade deals. But if it looks anything like the one from the UK, all bets are off. And again, I think that this is a concept of a deal. I don't think it's a deal. We have to see tomorrow. But futures are pointing up, and we'll have to see that. For a long time, investors have been tricked into thinking that the Fed has everything under control and that the worst is behind them. They are greatly mistaken. And Powell said at the same time when this memo was released that the markets are in a great place. How can he say that when the Fed is saying at the same time that unemployment will rise and all indications are showing stagflation? It doesn't sound like a great place to me. And this is why the Fed is boxed in, because here's the deal. So right now, inflation is hot, right? So we're not at 2%. So if we start to shed jobs, right? So what happens is they're already saying that the Western ports, there's no ships coming in. So a lot of people who have small businesses, even medium-sized, even large businesses, they're not able to get stuff, right? So what happens to those businesses, right? So if you have a little stockpile, right? Well, you better raise your prices quick, because if you're not raising your prices according to the stuff that's coming in or not coming in, you're going to get knocked out. So what do you do when the shelves are empty and you got nothing to sell? What do you think happens to that business? Most businesses, because the Fed has kept rates so low, too low, we have so many corporations loaded up with debt. That's another thing that nobody talks about. So now we have a lot of small businesses loaded up with debt. Now their shelves within the next month or two will definitely have a shock to them, right? Because if we're not bringing in stuff right now, even if China says, okay, we'll have a full deal and we'll start sending everything, it takes time to make the stuff, produce it, get it on the ship, bring it here, right? So, I remember how Americans acted when toilet paper during COVID, or we didn't have toilet paper, or we didn't have, hand sanitizer. People were freaking out. They're like, oh my God, there's no toilet paper. Well, what's going to happen when there's no medicine on the shelves, right? Or, we don't get that medical equipment, or something really serious. I have a relative who works for Ford, and last week they had to turn away 5 customers already because they didn't have the parts. So stuff is already getting jammed up, And how many times, like, you know, if you have a bay, let's say you have a mechanic shop, right? I mean, you hire people, okay, they're getting paid. How long could you pay your employees and send away customers, right? Because you didn't get the stuff, right? This is the problem. That the gamblers on Wall Street are not thinking about. And so we could see massive layoffs and a lot of businesses going out of business needlessly because this should have never been done like this. So I want to talk about Scott Besset because he's really the cornerstone of trade. And Scott Besset was mercilessly confronted by Representative Mark Pocan, I think that's how you say his name, P-O-C-A-N, over Trump tariffs. And we need to listen to this clip because it was really hard to watch. Remember now, this is the Treasury Secretary. This guy is very successful. I looked up his net worth. It's in between $500 million and $1 billion. Okay? So respectfully, he should know better to who pays tariffs. So let's check out the video and then I'll comment about it. You got to hear this. He's stumbling. He's bumbling. And again, he was made a complete fool in Congress because he couldn't answer the question.
Answer Mr. Pocan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being with us. My main concern is, I think, what people are looking at the economy. You know, the first 100 days, low stock market since Richard Nixon, not usually a measure people are shooting for. On tariffs, the fact that last year we had an effective rate of about 2.5%. I think the Yale Budget Lab, and I believe you went to Yale, has said that effective rate is closer to 28%, the highest since 1901. I know some of that's changed because the tariffs are on again, off again, some on again, some off again. Somewhat chaotic, I believe, as your term is, what, Crazy Ivan style. I compare them to how a monkey throws dung. You're not exactly sure where they're going to land. And that's the concern I have as a small business owner, and I know Ms. Lusenkamp-Perez is as well. You know, I've got small businesses really worried. You made a comment about while cargo volumes have dropped 60%, you see this as a temporary detox. But for a small...
Now, just to cut in, the ports in Portland haven't had ships there in 3 days. And no ships, no cargo has come in Portland in 3 days. Southern California, you know, again, no ships are coming in. So, this happened a couple of days ago. So, you know, it's going to build up, and that means there's no trains to send stuff. People who drive truck, right? They're going to have nothing to ship. What happens to those guys, right? They're going to show up at the port to pick some up. It's going to be an empty trailer. Again, you can't pay people to drive around with nothing in the back.
Small business that's getting by day to day, that's much bigger. You talked about Main Street. We want to finally focus on Main Street, not Wall Street. I think you were at a global investor conference in Beverly Hills yesterday. That's the cocktail party where you mentioned the Crazy Ivan theory. And before that, you were at a J.P. Morgan Chase World Bank private investor summit. All those things are not Main Street, right? Main Street is an auto body repair, a specialty printer. So my concern...
And again, you have to understand, why is he going to Beverly Hills and, you know, J.P. Morgan? You know, because again, Trump has everybody over a barrel in the United States. And, you know, look, hey, you know, you want some tariff relief? Go buy some meme coin. Hey, go join my son's, what's that? The executive club, right? And then you could get in and then we'll cut some deals with your company. That's the corrupt part about this whole thing. We have mega donors. We have the corporate masters, you know, sucking up to people like Scott Besset, trying to cut side deals that you are not going to get. Let's be clear. Me and you, all of us, we're not going to get this same deal, okay, that the people in Beverly Hills are going to get. Or, you know, all these big hedge fund guys. You could be sure of that. That's why they pay, you know, $500,000 to join a stupid club. Or $1 million. Or why are they buying the meme coin? That's why.
On the tariffs. Who pays tariffs, Mr. Secretary?
Who pays tariffs was the question. Look, he can't answer it.
No. Answer the questions I asked, please. I only have 5 minutes.
He was
Who pays
mumbling.
tariffs?
Sorry? Well,
Who pays tariffs?
No,
Mr. Secretary, please.
Excuse me.
The question is very simply, who pays tariffs, Mr. Chairman? I'd like him to answer that question. He wants to answer other questions.
Well, Congressman, if the exporters, they dislike tariffs so much, why wouldn't they? If I think what you're trying to get me to say.
Did you remember the question? I'm not sure you did. Who pays tariffs?
It's a very complicated question.
Reclaiming my time.
Not that complicated.
People pay tariffs,
That's-
right? Reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary. Reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary. Reclaiming my time. You clearly aren't going to answer. I'm not going to waste my time having you go,
Right.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chairman, I asked reclaiming my time.
Tariffs.
Mr. Chairman, and I asked to reclaim my time. Did I not?
That was a brutal indictment. That was a brutal answer. And, you know, there are certain stations that are not going to play that clip, you know, because they don't want to show you that truth. That was a truth that just happened right there. Here's a congressman. You know, he's got Scott Besset right there in the crosshairs. Got him under oath, so he can't lie. That's the whole thing. You've got to get these people under oath so they cannot lie. And there's just a couple of more minutes of this, and then we'll get back to it.
No, I said reclaiming my time because he's clearly not answering it. So, yeah, so as a small business owner, and unfortunately I'd like that time back since you failed to recognize me for 30 seconds. So I just recently, from one of my suppliers, got the tariff surcharge on things. And in addition to the tariff surcharge, guess what else got raised? American-made walnut plaques. That has nothing to do with tariffs, but companies take advantage and do that. So right now, we are getting screwed right and left because of the indiscriminate use of tariffs. That's the reality for Main Street. And you go off to Beverly Hills for private investor conferences and talk about Crazy Ivan theories. Answer that. What is the Crazy Ivan theory of tariffs that you mentioned at the summit?
Well, first of all, sir, I've had meetings with more than 50 small lenders, so I want to clarify that. I would also say that,
you know, when he says small lenders, you know, in his world, what he considers a small lender, you know, this isn't like the payday loan guy up the road, you know. These guys live, let me tell you, they live in a completely different world than the rest of us.
in game theory, strategic uncertainty, of which you seem to like the name Crazy Ivan.
Well, it's your words, correct? Didn't you use Crazy Ivan at the...
Well, you've used it 5 times, and I am saying the strategic uncertainty is part of negotiations.
So their plan is to create strategic uncertainty. Oh my God!
Should we say, here's what we'll accept?
Well, they've retrieved that one.
Please take this.
Okay, I've got your answer. Thank you. I'm going to reclaim my time again. So for a small business, we don't have that luxury, right?
Yeah.
When the ports are empty in California and we can't get goods and people are stocking up for Christmas goods, Crazy Ivan is great for, please don't take this offense, really rich people like you, but for people like me, it's not.
Yeah, so look, you understand. So, you know, again, you know, when, you know, you have people living in a completely different financial world than the rest, than the average American, you know, then what happens is that, you know, they don't mind, you know, if we are short, you know, they're not going to be short. Let me word it that way. People like Scott Besset, you know, the whole Trump, the entire administration. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in his cabinet that isn't worth at least $100 million or more. Okay, and so, you know, these are incredibly wealthy people. This is the cabinet with the most billionaires ever assembled in one White House, and so. You know, yeah, they're not worried, you know, because they can ride out the storm, you know. They don't have to, you know, worry about this stuff. You know, they have so much food and stockpiled goods. Okay, they don't even know what they have. These are people who don't drive, right? These are people who, don't understand the real cost of going to the grocery store. And, like I was talking to my mother today, and she's like, "Yay, Bobby, gas just went up by her again. It went up, and she's got only a few dollars to play with. And so, I got to keep sending them money, her and my aunt, because the Social Security check doesn't pay the bills. They've been destroyed. Their checks are destroyed. And, and now, it's going to get destroyed more with these type of policies. And, think about this. Remember this, when the shelves went empty during COVID, people started selling stuff on the black market. You're going to see that. You're going to see a lot of black market selling going on. You think people like my mother and aunt can afford to go buy in the black market? You think that they have stockpiles of stuff that they can just sit around and wait? No. It's going to be people like my mother and aunt, and possibly some of you out there, that are going to get clipped again. But this time it's going to be much harder, right? Because this was a forced error, at least with COVID. And again, everybody, whoever knows me, knows I did not agree with 90% of the policies that happened between Trump and Biden during COVID. But okay, back then you had a virus, and you could at least hang all of your excuses on the virus. This was a completely forced error, right? This was forced. There was no need to do this, right? No matter how much fear-mongering and, excuses that are being made, this did not have to be implemented like this, to where you're putting tariffs on countries with just penguins on it. But yet, Russia doesn't get a tariff. The whole thing is completely backwards, and you shouldn't be tariffing the entire world. And so, we pay the tariffs. But, so I'm scared for people who live check to check. If you're just starting a business, right? Or, if you don't have a lot of resources, right? Maybe you have a job and you're doing okay, right? But can you miss a week of work? Can you miss, not having certain things, to buy certain things? What happens if your car breaks and there's no parts, right? I mean, are you going to be like in Cuba, right? They don't trade with anybody, right? So in Cuba, right, they basically build parts out of coffee cans and stuff. You think Americans are going to do that? You think we're going to be able to build stuff in the driveway, right? I mean, all of this takes time, right? To build a factory, right? To build all of the supply chain, right? Remember this, even when we were in the Industrial Revolution, it took almost 30 years for America to build the Industrial Revolution. China started this, opening up their markets in the 90s. They've been working at this for 35, 40 years, right? They didn't just start yesterday, okay? In order for us to reindustrialize our entire economy, okay, it's going to take decades, okay? So whenever you see a pundit going on TV, making it sound like, oh, we have the upper hand, this is going to be so easy, all these jobs are going to come back. They're not. See, here's the thing. In order for America to create the factories, to hire the people, right? First, like I was saying earlier, our country is loaded with debt. Our corporations are loaded with debt. Individuals are loaded with debt. Matter of fact, there's a story, I don't know if I can get to it later, about college students, record debt. They're defaulting on their loans. They don't want to default on their loans. They have to. They're losing their jobs, right? They can't afford it. Also, we have a lot of people who are walking away from their homes in certain sections of the country. They can't afford them. So, foreclosures are up. credit card defaults are up, right? So we are not in a position to, come together and, start building these factories out. And then not only do you have to build the factories, you got to hire the workers, right? They have to get trained, right? Then now you did all this and you have to compete, right? Well, you have to be able to compete with other countries as well, unless your only market is the United States, right? Which is fine, right? But if that's your only market, that looks a lot like Cuba, right? Because Cuba's their only market. Now, we have more people than Cuba, but again, that's not a thriving economy, right? When you have the government basically telling you, hey, put on more sweaters, right? Hey, you're not going to have as many dolls. Hey, shortages are coming, right? Just deal with it. That's not a good message. So to answer the question, yes, it's going to take years to reindustrialize the country. Now, I have to give Trump credit for something, and I give Trump credit for recognizing the problem. What he's doing is he's trying to treat the symptom, but he's not treating the disease. The disease is in our country. It's not overseas. It's not the evil foreigners stealing our jobs. It's not unfair trade, right? That's not what's killing us. What's killing us is ourselves, right? And I'll give you a good example. So, Doge went in and they claim that they have $160 billion in cuts. Well, now there are groups that have come out that are testing to see, okay, what was actually cut. And it turns out it's somewhere around $40 billion. Now, $40 billion is a lot of money, but it's not 160, and it's certainly not $1 trillion, right? Okay, fine. $40 billion. But now, Trump, again, there are several tax plans out there, so it's very hard to nail down which tax plan that Trump is actually going to sign, like what's Congress going to pass and what's going to sign. But the numbers that I'm seeing go anywhere from $4.5 trillion to $6 trillion in cuts. So it's in between 4.5 and 6 trillion. Okay? Last I checked my math, 40 billion does not cover anything near, 450 to 600 billion. Now, you could say, yeah, but Bobby, you know what? We now have 10% tariffs all around, so we're going to be taxed a lot more now, right? Because of the 10% tariff. And that's true. So basically, when Trump was talking about the other day, he actually mentioned redistribution. Now, he's talking about taxing the wealthy, which might not be a bad idea, right? To tax the wealthy and give a tax cut to the middle and lower class. But here's the problem. If you're going to give us a nominal tax cut, but then charge us a tariff, it's not a tax cut at all. All you're doing, and again, the word is redistribution, right? Again, you have to ask yourself, look at your country. Do you deserve a tax cut with a deficit of $4.5 trillion, $2 trillion a year, right? Is that the country that gets the tax cut? Of course not, right? What we need to do is we need to tighten our belt. We need both parties to come together, right? And work on fixing our budget, right? Get our house in line. Help to lift people up at the bottom level, right? We need to help the people who are hanging on by a shoestring, right? But we need to cut off the corporate welfare, right? We need to cut off all the money going to the donors and the corporate class, right? And, we need to also fix the dollar. That's the one part, the underpinning of the whole economy. We need to fix the dollar, right? And so in order to fix the dollar, we need some pain, right? And part of that pain is relieving the debt that dollar has allowed us to have. They need rates to go up, right? we need to ease up on expanding the money supply, right? We need to stop giving out loans that people can't afford, right? We need to stop allowing corporations to take on a bunch of debt and then buy a bunch of stock. This is not a healthy economy, right? We need companies to hire people and give them a living wage, right? God, I sound like Bernie on that one. But it's true. We need to bring back the worker, right, and give him the tools, her the tools that they need, right, to succeed. And this economy isn't doing it. That's the problem. So, yeah. This is not going to be done with one party, and it's not going to be done in 1 year. Look, we took 50 years of destroying the dollar and destroying our economic engine, and we're going to take years to bring that back. And what I don't like, what is going on now, is that they're making it sound like, oh, we're just going to snap a finger and everything's going to be fixed right away. You are not going to undo 50 years of bad monetary and fiscal policy in a year or in 4 months like I'm hearing. That's completely ridiculous. And just to kind of put a pin in this, all the money flooding into the stock market, okay, that's gambling, okay? Like tonight, if you look at the futures, they're all way up, right? Again, that's not creating jobs. That's not putting food on the table. That's not making us more productive, right? That's not going to make us more energy efficient or anything. It's not going to, help raise your family, right? This is just pure speculation and gambling. And so what I'm trying to do is teach people in a very cost-effective way how to get on economic lifeboats before the ship sinks, right? And so for people who can't afford to buy certain things, you want to buy real assets, right? You don't want to buy things that are just being gambled on, right? That's why not that you can't make money in crypto, you can, right? But that's pure speculation. That's just pure gambling, right? And, we have to understand that there's a difference between price and value, right? Like Bitcoin has a price, but it has no value. Where gold has a price and gold has a value, right? Because gold has a real need. So anyway, I want to get into this other story. So, and I hope I kind of cleared up some questions that I seen. So I really want to see both parties come together and hammer out some good deals. So, nearly 24 suspects in Georgia, including a Georgia politician, a Democrat, was arrested in connection with a multi-agency human trafficking operation. So this was in Columbus, Georgia. According to the Muskogee County Sheriff's Office, I'm sorry I butchered that name, 19 suspects, including the Democrat Georgia politician, has been arrested in connection to a multi-agency human trafficking operation. Deputies said that the operation targeted those willing to exploit children by purchasing sex with a minor. Officials say boys and girls were targeted through social media apps and dating websites. Authorities confirmed no children were harmed. Officials say 32-year-old Carl Sprayberry and 18 other suspects are behind bars after a 4-day operation from April 25th to 28th. It focused on individuals engaging in sexually explicit communications with children on the internet who arranged to engage in sex with the child and to travel for the purpose of having sex. An operation like this takes months to prepare, and District Attorney Don Kelly said, protecting our children from these kinds of predators is one of our most important things that we can do as law enforcement and prosecutors. Officials encourage parents to monitor their children while using social media, of course. You have to watch what's going on today. There's all sorts of weirdos and perverts out there, and so it's very important that we do that. The sheriff said, I can't stress enough for parents to please monitor your children and what they do on the computer. It's okay to be nosy parents. Know who they are speaking with, because they're not going to stop preying on our kids. So, this was a story that was sent to me. This isn't the type of story that I normally do. But a friend of mine was really passionate about it, said, hey, can you mention that? And so I did. And so, we should call out. To me, it doesn't matter if the guy's Democrat or Republican. I don't care who he is. You don't mess with children. And so that's where I stand on it. And so, so let's hope that, if the trial says that these guys are 100% guilty, that they get locked away, forever. We have no use for people like this in our society. So that's where I stand on it. Now, finally, my last story, which is controversial, but I didn't think it was controversial. Growing up, this was never like that controversial of a thing. But I think now with the internet it is. And we finally now have a new Pope. Pope Leo. And this really shouldn't be that controversial. But like everything in the U.S., everything gets reduced down to a left-right prism. Good and evil. And, and for me personally, sometimes I engage in that sort of thing. Sometimes I don't. I try not to. But the thing that got me with this Pope Leo, is that literally within 15 minutes of this guy being picked, I've had messages and people making comments throughout the day and the next day, wanted to ask me, where do I stand with the Pope? And honestly, I didn't have an answer because I didn't even know the guy. I knew nothing about him. I'm not going to lie. And so far what I see is that the Republican Party and MAGA seem split on the Pope, right? Because I have some people on my feed, they're cheering him on. They're saying, oh, look, Trump helped this guy get in. And then on the other side, I see this guy's the devil. He's the worst thing since, I don't know, since the dinosaurs were killed. So it's kind of strange to see the Republicans split on the Pope. Democrats, not so much. I didn't really see much from them. Just, hey, I wish the guy a lot of luck, this sort of thing. From what I see on the left, they seem to like the Pope overall. But I wanted to play a clip from the Pope. It's his first Mass in the Vatican. And then I'll give some more thoughts on it. I'd only take a minute.
But I want to repeat the words.
And just think about it, because this is, to me, this meant a lot. So I'm a Catholic, so whatever. Whatever it means to you, check it out.
But I want to repeat the words from the responsorial psalm. I will sing a new song to the Lord because he has done marvels. And indeed, not just with me, but with all of us, my brother cardinals, as we celebrate this morning, I invite you to recognize the marvels that the Lord has done, the blessings that the Lord continues to pour out upon all of us. Through the ministry of Peter, you have called me to carry that cross and to be blessed with that mission. And I know I can rely on each and every one of you to walk with me as we continue as a church, as a community of friends of Jesus, as believers, to announce the good news, to announce the gospel.
So, I grew up Catholic, Roman Catholic. I went through the whole thing, and I grew up under very strict terms. There was no hanky-panky in the church. There was no fooling around. It was like serious business. And it was a different time. And so, look, the Catholic Church has a lot of work to do to bring back Catholics who have been completely displaced by all the, sex crimes and things that have happened that are still coming out to this day. And so, what I'm hoping for this Pope to do is to, if something comes out, he calls it out and punishes the priest and stands on the side of the victims. That's what I want. I also want the Catholic Church to continue feeding the poor, right? Catholic charities are incredible charities. Like I've told a story all the time about when nuns came to my house as a child, and my grandmother had answered the door, and they were there to feed us. We were in the community, and I tell people all the time I was poor, but I didn't know it, right? And so I'd like to get back to that. I'd like to get back to churches actually doing the work of, getting people together, teaching the Word of God, teaching the Bible, right? Getting people back to community, right? That's what it's about, right? Treat your fellow neighbor, right, with respect, regardless if he has, some flag outside or something, right? We should at least respect each other. I mean, every religion, every major religion has its own problems, right? And so I'm not going to make excuses for the Catholic Church. I've always been a straight shooter. There was a lot there over the past few decades that came out that I'm glad came out. And I hope that there's no more covering up of this stuff, and that this Pope takes us in a better direction, a direction that calls out the perverts and the people doing the wrong thing, but at the same time, keep preaching for peace in the world, right? Treat your neighbors, treat foreigners with respect, right? Right, what did the Bible talk about immigrants and stuff like this, right? So we need to go back to what the Bible teaches, right? Like who's giving your sermon? That's important, right? Because there's a lot of preachers out there who will twist the Bible, right, in such a way, right? Like you think in the Bible, you're closer to God because you give the guy a jet, right? That's all that stuff is nonsense. So we need to bring being humble back, right? And all of this is the stuff that I believe in. I believe in charity and helping your fellow neighbor. And so, as far as this Pope goes, Pope Leo, I wish him luck, just as I did Trump. When Trump came in, I said, God, I hope he's the greatest president of my lifetime. I hope that this Pope is the greatest Pope of my lifetime, right? I hope he can bring people back into the church, right? Because and for good reason, right? For family and for friends and for neighbors, because it's a great faith, right? It is. It really is. And it's a shame that the Catholic Church has been stained by a few bad apples. Well, more than a few, but enough bad apples that it really hurt the church. Now, me personally, I'm a spiritual person. You know, the last time I've been to church was when I laid a friend to rest about 2 weeks ago. I laid a friend to rest, and I went into church, and I received my communion, and I asked for forgiveness, and I did all that, and I said the prayer, and it felt good, right? It felt good. I was there with the parishioners, and you know, besides the fact that we're laying my friend to rest, you know, it felt good to be in the community and to do that for that moment, but I don't need that for me, you know. Maybe at some point in the future it will be, but for right now, no. I'm a spiritual person, and I believe God is within me, within all of us, and you know, so I want to be judged on how I treat others, right? And so, you know, let's, with the new Pope, give the guy a chance. You know, nobody has a perfect background. Lord knows I don't. Nobody does, right? So let's give this guy a chance. Let's see what he does. And look, when he does something wrong, I'll call him out. When he does the right thing, hey, we should praise the guy.
Bobby,
just like...
Excuse me, Bobby Down there. Looking good, buddy. I love the shirt. You're so handsome.
Ah!
He's a handsome man.
Oh, thank you, Trump.
Love this guy. God bless you.
Oh.
Love the show. Great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's right. I agree. Charity begins at home. And, you know, and to lift up others who are feeling down, right? That's our job, right? It's easy to go out and bash people and to attack people because they think differently on an issue than you. You know, like, let's show a little bit. Look, here's what I'm going to ask of everybody. Let's say you come across somebody who has a different opinion, right? Let's try to show a little charity towards that person and not completely attack the person. You know, because again, we have a lot of scars in this country that are created by political leaders, right? And at the end of the day, we're all neighbors, we're all Americans, right? And no matter what faith we have, whether if you're Jewish, you're Catholic, you're Christian, Protestant, whatever you are, right? We're all neighbors, and we should at least respect others' opinions, even when we don't agree. So let's be a little kinder to each other. Let's, you know, help our fellow neighbor when they're down, and that's it. That's what I wanted to leave you with. So I'm going to wish the Pope a lot of luck. He's not a perfect man. We're all sinners, and that's where I am. And I will update everybody when I find out more about the Pope. Pope Leo. So I want to thank everybody. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. You guys are awesome. This video, I'll probably have it loaded on Saturday next week on YouTube. If anybody who has extra time, go check out, if you didn't catch my last video, go on youtube.com / Broom Media. Check out my last video. What I do is I'll take this video, I'll put up cool graphics and stuff, and so it's a little different than what you see here. And I'd like to get up those numbers. So you know, copy, paste, do all that stuff. Comment, like, share. I appreciate you guys. Happy Mother's Day. Not everybody has their mother, but just know this. If you're a believer, the spirit of your mother is around you. We love you. And thank you, because you could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here. And I thank you for that. God bless. Let's have a great week together. Thank you.